A tariff is a what?
It is a fee charge. We cannot tax a foreign country.
A tariff
we can tax
is a
citizens.
fee charged to who?
A foreign country.
No, it is not. Okay. Is there any evidence? I can't believe you just said that. Any evidence that a foreign government has paid Donald Trump's tariffs?
We're talking about producers in foreign countries. We're not.
Tariffs are paid by who?
Tariffs can be paid by many.
They can be.
We have not seen any inflationary pressures from tariffs. That is null and void.
That is definitely not true.
That is very true.
And my
the true inflation numbers are close to 1% right now. So let's leave that on the table. I just want to.
I think we ought to acknowledge something. This is a properly functioning government today. The President of the United States, the head of the executive branch,
you should be paid a lot of money from the Trump administration for helping to.
Oh no, I get paid a lot of money here.
Well, I know you
just
do,
to be clear,
and in other places too. But you should be paid by the Trump administration for what you said, because
to loop back to the benefits that we've seen.
Did you hear anything that I just read?
I did, but it's actually
listen,
not
I understand what you're saying. In this
they did just rule on the narrow statutes.
It's broad. It is not unlimited, and it is not forever. Correct?
No, that's actually not correct. He has congressional.
You just saw it. 30 seconds in, and the entire argument collapses. They still don't know who pays tariffs. After years of this debate, after economists, after business owners, after literal court rulings, they are still pretending foreign governments write a check to America when Trump snaps his fingers. That's not how it works. That has never been how it works. And Abby Phillip wasn't having it. Notice the hesitation. Notice the backtracking. First, it's foreign countries pay. Then it's, well, producers. Then it could be many. That's what happens when the talking point runs into reality. And here's the thing. This isn't some minor technical error. This is the entire foundation of the argument. If you don't understand who pays the tariff, you don't understand the policy, period. And tonight, Abby forces them to confront that basic fact, and they hate it. Stick around, because it only gets worse from here.
The economics of it, because essentially they're just saying, look, this is not the statute to do what you want to do, and particularly if what you want to do is just random tariffs on every country in the world at whatever number you want it to be. There are other things that you can do. It's just not this.
Yeah, so let's back up 1 second. This is strictly having to do with IEEPA. This does not have to do with a sweeping tariff rebut from the Supreme Court. IEEPA only enables the president to block trade or stop trade with countries. He cannot gain one single dollar from the IEEPA ruling. The other tariffs in place, which are about half of what's in place, has not been touched by the Supreme Court. He has a constitutional right to have those tariffs in place, and he's now going to replace the IEEPA tariffs that were put in place, which, by the way, were put in place mainly with China, Mexico, and Canada in order to secure our borders and stop the flow of fentanyl into the country. This was part of his negotiation. So we're going to take the IEEPA away, which the Supreme Court ruled on today. He's then going to use Section 232, Section 301, Section 122, which, by the way, he already enacted Section 121 tonight with a sweeping 10% tariff, and just replace the IEEPA tariffs. That's really what we need to focus on here. This was not a sweeping rebut of President Trump's tariffs. This was IEEPA only.
I guess I disagree on a host of dimensions. One dimension that seems really, really important is, while it's true that you're already starting to see the president talk about other trade authorities and, in fact, invoke other trade authorities to try to replicate some of these IEEPA tariffs that were struck down this morning, the reality is there is a lot more process that is required to be able to effectuate those other types of trade authorities. The existing 10% across the board tariffs that were levied tonight, those are only going to be in place for 150 days and only will stay in place if Congress authorizes them to continue. So this is a really significant ruling, and it's a really significant ruling because from a legal perspective, you had a court who stood up to the president and said the power to tax and the power to spend rests with Congress and Congress alone. I do agree with you from an economic perspective. If you think about what this ruling really means, there have been about $140 billion of IEEPA tariffs that have been levied in the last year. Those tariffs have fallen through to consumers in the form of higher prices. And if and when we see any refunds, and again, the decision isn't clear about exactly what process that would undertake, even if they were to do refunds, those would go to firms and not to the American consumers. And so I actually do think this is quite significant from the consumer's perspective because they're unlikely to see any relief.
Well, let me just take two quick points. First, from the consumer perspective, we have not seen any inflationary pressures from tariffs. That is null
That
and
is
void.
definitely not true.
That is very true.
And my
The true
estimates-
inflation numbers are close to
That's
1% right now. So let's
not
leave
at all
that
the
on the
case.
table. I just want to say one thing. The semantics of a tax versus a tariff is in question here. All right. The president has the constitutional right to tariff, not to tax. And the
Supreme Court settled that issue, or they answered that point today, and they made it very clear that in this case, a tariff is a tax that is, and both are in the hands of Congress.
And that is not true. A tax and that's semantics.
How is that semantics?
Because we already have the tariff law of the Tariff Act of 1962 and 1974, which gives the president the right to control imports via.
Okay, but what is a tariff?
A tariff
What is a tariff?
A tariff is a fee charged to another country.
Okay.
Tax.
Based-
No, it's not.
That's the semantics.
tax on the
tax-
importers.
A tariff is a what?
It is a fee charged. We cannot tax a foreign
A
country. We
tariff
can tax
is a
citizens.
fee charged to who?
A foreign country.
No, it is not. Okay.
I'll tell you who pays. Well, I'll
is
answer that.
not
I'm not even an economic expert. The importers. I have a friend who imports T-shirts and sneakers from overseas. He pays the tariff, not China.
Is there any evidence? I can't believe you just said that. Any evidence that a foreign government has paid Donald Trump's tariffs?
We're talking about producers in foreign countries. We're not
Tariffs are paid by who?
Tariffs can be paid by many.
They are
can be paid by the
corporations.
importers.
They are
could
paid
be.
by companies. Some of them are foreign companies, but some of them are American companies. Here's one corporation. This is actually the plaintiff in this case. Here's what he says he wants to see.
And they know exactly what they took from us, when and why and how much. And they can just reverse the gears and send it back to us. It's our money. They took it unlawfully. They have to return it. And I'm not crying for them that they find it inconvenient.
They said they spent $10 million paying Trump's tariffs that we now know are illegal. And on top of that, just to circle back to what we were talking about, the CBO, this is one of many reports on this, but the CBO just recently said U.S. businesses will absorb 30% of the import price increases by reducing their profit margins. The remaining 70% will be passed through to consumers by raising prices. So the net effect of the tariffs will be to raise consumer prices by the full portion of the cost of the tariffs borne domestically, 95%. So look, at the end of the day, he's a business owner. You can't tell him he didn't bear the cost of tariffs. He wrote the check.
Well, which is it? You said all of it was passed through the consumers. You said that most of it was absorbed by some of the companies. It sounds like maybe it might be a little bit of both. I mean, how you refund this? I have no idea. I mean, this is a total mess. You're talking about massive amount of money.
How did they charge it?
And
they can refund what they charged.
I guess, but if you want to go into the Treasury and start writing checks on this, it feels, and the court acknowledged that it feels like it's going to be a bit of a mess. I assume, Ellie, there'll be massive amount of litigation about this over the next couple of years. I will just say, politically today, it was a big breaking news day, but I just think we ought to acknowledge something. This is a properly functioning government.
Let's pause right here, because this is where the mask slips. You can't simultaneously argue that tariffs don't raise prices and then admit companies either absorb cost or pass them on. Which one is it? If companies absorb it, profits drop. When profits drop, hiring slows, wages freeze, promotions disappear. And if they pass it on, prices go up. Consumers pay. Either way, Americans pay. And here's the bigger problem. The Supreme Court just ruled that the specific authority used was unlawful. That's not a small technicality. That's the highest court in the country saying, no, you don't get unlimited power here. And instead of acknowledging that reality, the pivot is, we'll just try another statute. That's not a defense of the policy that's scrambling. This is what happens when a political talking point runs headfirst into constitutional limits. The argument shifts from this is great for America to, well, maybe we can legally repackage it. If the policy is so popular, if it's such an economic miracle, why not take it to Congress? Why not codify it cleanly? Because deep down, they know something. The numbers don't lie. The costs land here on businesses, on workers, on consumers, not Beijing, not Ottawa, not Mexico City. Here,
today, the President of the United States, the head of the executive branch, made a policy decision. The Supreme Court, that renders legal opinions about these kinds of decisions, made a decision. They said you can't do that. The President of the United States said, okay, I agree, and I will acknowledge your decision. I am going to use a different statute to try to do what I want to do. This is properly functioning government. And I'll tell you one more thing. For every Democrat and every media person that has gone on for the last year or two about how this Supreme Court is a wholly owned subsidiary of Donald Trump, that it's not independent, that it does whatever he says to do, obviously that narrative was obliterated today. So to me, I thought the ruling was sound. I think the president is sound to try other statutes. And I think the narratives about the court not being independent and the president not obeying the court were totally blown up today.
That was a very explanation of what took place today, Scott. You should be paid a lot of money from the Trump administration for helping to.
Oh no, I get paid a lot of money here.
Well, I know you
just
do,
to be clear.
and in other places too. But you should be paid by the Trump administration for what you said, because the reality is that the president didn't just accept the ruling like you said he did.
Yes, he did.
He got up
He
there.
acknowledged it and accepted it.
He got up there in the press conference today, and he attacked the U.S. Supreme Court justices. He said that they should be embarrassed for their families for making a decision that stood up to him. He attacked them and said they were disloyal and unpatriotic. He said they were disloyal to the Constitution even. That's more than disagreement. That's irresponsible rhetoric. And the problem is, Scott, even though today the Supreme Court did the right thing, according to everyone here at the table, apparently, except maybe you, Anthony, the truth is that this is the first major decision where they have actually disagreed with the president on any of his priorities. So yes, they got one right, but that doesn't negate everything else that they've done. Donald Trump doesn't like to govern. Donald Trump likes to rule by decree, and the Supreme Court finally stood in and said you can't do that on this one issue.
Quickly, if I could, I mean, the reason there's not National Guard on the streets in Chicago right now is the Supreme Court blocked that too. And I think Trump's about to go on a bit of a losing streak with the court. I mean, between today, he's going to lose birthright, I believe, birthright citizenship eventually. I also think he's going to lose his effort to fire Lisa Cook off the Fed. So I think, to Scott's point, I think the narrative that the Supreme Court is automatically in Trump's pocket and always has been, I think it is overblown. And I think they're disproving that now and will continue over the next several months.
Yeah, it's interesting because they do push the envelope on this stuff, and they could easily have, to your point, I mean, there are all kinds of different statutory authorities for the president to do all kinds of different things, and he's going to use some of them now. And they could have tried to do it that way. I don't know. Do you have a theory? I have a theory, but I'm curious if you have a theory about why the Trump administration decided to do it this particular way.
Yeah, I have a bit of a theory, which is that of all of the trade authorities that exist to support the president's agenda, this is the one that has the least set of requirements attached to it. It is the one where, with a stroke of a pen on any particular day, and in fact, we've seen it on 60 days so far in this Trump administration, you are able to change tariff rates because you see a commercial you don't like, or your adversary or ally does something that you don't agree with. And I think the challenge with all of these other approaches, some of which would actually require the president to go to Congress and try to legislate the trade agenda, as has always been done historically, don't afford you that same flexibility. And I think that flexibility might sound like it's attractive, but actually, Scott, to your point, I think today you did see government function and our institutions function the way they're supposed to. But something that you also saw was the reintroduction of incredible volatility into our trade policy. What are businesses supposed to be planning for? What is the tariff rate likely to be next week, next month, 6 months from now? How do consumers plan for that? And how do our allies think about us in negotiations when it's not at all clear what authorities or the extent to which they're legally viable pathways to effectuate some of these policies?
I think the last point you made is one of the most important for how the president moves forward here, because if you talk to him about this, beyond just the economics, he believes these tariffs and the ability for him to unilaterally do it is his biggest diplomatic tool. He thinks that it's been huge in trade negotiations. He thinks it's helped him solve some of these peace agreements. He thinks it gives the American president, in any room that that person is in, this massive cudgel against other countries to extract outcomes that we want on a number of fronts. So I think the last point you made is very true.
And he's wrong about that.
Why is he wrong about it?
Chief Justice, the president asserts the extraordinary power to unilaterally impose tariffs of unlimited amount, duration, and scope. In light of the breadth, history, and constitutional context of that asserted authority, he must identify clear congressional authorization to exercise it. He's pretty crystal clear. That's the scope. There's a reason that, according to Chief Justice Gorsuch and 6 other Supreme Court justices, Congress does not give that power to the president. And it has to do with the fact that, as we just discussed, tariffs, like taxes, cost people money. Money comes out of their pockets and goes to the Treasury. And that is a power that belongs to Congress. And if Congress, which is, controlled by the president's party, supports the president's agenda, and if these tariffs are so popular and such a key to economic prosperity, 2 questions. Why are they so unpopular? Why do Americans say 56% say they hurt the economy? And why won't Congress just codify them?
So what I would say that, first of all, Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution gives the president the right to work on international affairs, manage international affairs, and trade. Period. Hard stop. He has the right to implement tariffs. That's not the question here. The question is IEPA. To loop back to the benefits that we've seen.
Did you hear anything that I just read?
I did, but it's actually
listen,
not
I
accurate.
understand what you're saying. In this
They did just rule on the narrow statute, though.
Hold on, just a second. I understand the context of what you're saying in that they're ruling on IEPA. But what Chief Justice Roberts is saying is that what Trump is asserting is that using national security as a justification to impose tariffs of any size, scope, and duration is not constitutional. He says that very clearly here.
That is IEPA. That's fine.
Okay. So we're in agreement on that. The president has limited authorities that are delegated by Congress to impose trade restrictions under certain circumstances, under other statutes, but it is not broad, it is not unlimited, and it is not forever. Correct?
No, that's actually not correct. He has congressional authority to issue and implement tariffs under Section 122.
Under limited
They
under
each have
limited
their own limits
scope that
and
is
their own
delegated by Congress. That is the only
Section
point that I'm making.
232, for example, gives him the ability to put tariffs at 50% across the board.
The only point that I'm making is
they're substantial.
The only point that I'm making is that Congress determines what powers he has in those.
They've already determined that as well.
Anthony, you're making the argument that might have been okay yesterday, but today it lost, so it's not the law anymore.
He's saying that there's statutes that already exist.
Oh, I know.
Yes. The president's going to pivot to
Which
other
is fine.
statutory authority.
Yes.
Now, if he
Abby's
does
right, those are narrow.
maybe somebody ends up challenging that, and they are
let me
different
make
scope. The statutes are.
And this is where the entire argument just falls apart. Listen carefully to what they're admitting without realizing it. The president doesn't have unlimited authority. The statutes are narrow. The power is delegated. Congress decides the boundaries. That's not controversial. That's constitutional structure 101. And yet somehow we're still pretending this was some minor technical disagreement. It wasn't. If those other statutes were so broad, if they were so clean, if they gave him unlimited flexibility, he would have used them in the first place. He didn't. He chose the path with the least resistance, the fastest lever to pull, because speed and unilateral control were the point, not stability, not predictability, control. And think about what that means for businesses. One day it's 10%, the next day it's 50%, then it's paused, then it's reinstated, then it's challenged in court. How do you plan around that? How do you hire around that? How do you invest around that? You can't. This isn't strategic genius. It's volatility masquerading as strength. And when volatility becomes policy, the only people who really pay for it are the ones who don't get invited to cable news panels, workers, small business owners, and consumers trying to make a budget stretch just a little further. That's the reality they don't want to sit with.
You have to actually meet the requirements of those statutes.
Right.
He can't just say, I want 50% tariffs on the whole world. I'm just going to put it under this statute. If he could have done that, he would have done it. But he didn't. Those statutes are narrow. He has to meet certain requirements, and those requirements are dictated by Congress, not by the president.
Think about it this way.
That's the only point.
IEPA, the law that he tried to use today, would have been a sledgehammer for him to put in tariffs. Instead, that's been taken away, and now he's going to have to use a ball-peen hammer instead. The statutes that are left for him are much more restrictive. Still painful and still effective, but much more fine, much more limited in their scope.
Let's hit pause real quick, because there's more on the other side.
Here's the bottom line. This entire debate exposes something bigger than just tariffs. it exposes a mindset, a belief that if you repeat something confidently enough, foreign countries pay, it becomes true. But policy isn't a slogan. Economics isn't a chant at a rally. And constitutional authority isn't whatever you wish it to be that day. Tariffs are not magic leverage. They are not free money. They are not paid by some distant government out of goodwill. They are fees imposed on imports that ripple through supply chains and land one way or another on Americans, sometimes directly at checkout, sometimes through thinner margins, sometimes through slower hiring. But they land here. And what Abby did in this segment was simple but powerful. She forced clarity. She asked the basic question, who pays? Not ideology, not vibes, not spin. Who pays? And when the answer kept shifting, that told you everything. Now, add the Supreme Court ruling. The court didn't say tariffs are always illegal. It said this specific use of authority wasn't authorized the way it was claimed. That matters. Because in a constitutional system, power isn't assumed. It's granted, limited, defined. And when those limits are tested, institutions push back. That's not weakness, that's structure. The real issue here isn't whether a president likes tariffs. It's whether we pretend there are no guardrails, whether we pretend costs don't exist, whether we treat economic pain as collateral damage in a political performance. And when you see someone confidently claiming foreign governments are paying the bill after years of evidence to the contrary, you have to ask yourself, is this misunderstanding or is it deliberate spin? Because voters deserve honesty about who pays. Workers deserve honesty about the trade-offs. Businesses deserve stability instead of volatility by executive whim. That's why this exchange matters, not because it was loud, not because it was dramatic, but because it cut through the noise. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think tariffs are being honestly explained to the public, or are we still stuck on slogans instead of substance? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's actually break it down.